All right, welcome to another episode. In this case, it's a remote meeting with Design Build Ascend Studios with John Fox, the host. I've got a new friend of mine that I'd like you guys to get to know a little bit. His name is Kyle Maxwell. He is on Twitter as K Hendricks with double I. He's a serial entrepreneur and inspiring author and philosopher. He's a great guy. I would call him a kid because he's probably half my age. I don't mean to be offended. It just comes with the territory of being an old man. So welcome to the show, Kyle. How are you doing today?
Thank you, John, for having me on. And don't worry, I self-identify as a kid too. So
oh, that's good. So we met. Actually, I think we met first on Twitter, and we kind of chatted a little bit. I think how I first found you was you were making some statements about the culture today, and I sort of agreed with you, and I noticed some sort of an evolution in your thought process. I felt like you were somebody that was sort of waking up and wanting to talk and have some opinions and learn. You seem to read all these fantastic books, and I wanted to get a sense of who you were, and so I just started following you. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your jobs and what you do? You've got a couple of things. You used to do music and maybe your evolution from there, and in the daily break that you have and the video media. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate it. Anytime someone's interested in what I have to say, I have to thank you because, I'm just like you said, I'm 24. I don't want to come off as like I'm some type of like guru or a master or whatever. I'm still figuring things out, and there's a whole bunch of things I still don't know yet. So just want to make that point. So thank you again for having me on. Well, like you alluded to, my story is pretty crazy. So I'll try to give the condensed version. I started off pursuing a music career. I was managing music artists around the Element, Maryland. So we were primarily working with, it's called the DMV. I don't know if you ever heard that term or not. DC, Maryland, and Virginia. That's kind of like the Eastern Shore. So we were basically just working with music artists around this area. And, we would have shows here and there. I had the privilege of working with bigger independent record labels that are not even in existence anymore, who were pretty popular in the Baltimore area. I think you remember you told me you had some family members out here in this area. Yeah,
my parents used to live out there.
Yeah, I had a privilege of working with them. I was on their street marketing team for about a year and a half. Yeah, so that kind of all just faded away. It was a weird transition. It was just last year, actually, with the whole BLM stuff. 2020 was a crucial year for everyone. I always say on paper 2020 was horrible, but off script, I think that was a shifting point I think it did us more good off paper than on paper, if that makes any sense. Because I think a lot of people woke up to a lot of I hate using this term, a lot of misconceptions about just everything. People, I really believe people found out who they were that year. And it was crucial because, we were locked down, we were in isolation, we were literally cut off from the world. I mean, how could you not self-reflect under those conditions? If you didn't, you're weird. But yeah, anyway, so that kind of started the shift. And last year, I kind of just walked away from the music scene. I got that feeling of disgust. Disgust is a very, probably the most potent indication that you should stop doing what you're doing. I got disgust from it. So I was in the club one night. I was reading a book, John. Like I was reading a book. I was that guy. I was like Marcus Aurelius, like reading a book during a big celebration. So I just left. And that was it. The last oomph just left my body. Didn't want to do it. Why? I have no idea. I just didn't feel right. So I kind of just left that in the past. But I never stopped my other adventures. I don't really like talking about my businesses that much. It feels kind of weird. It feels kind of self-promoting-ish.
Sure.
But, I mean, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
It's a starting point.
Yeah, yeah, the marketing company, Viva Media Group, you already said it. I help small business owners. We're launching a consulting portion of that this summer. I'm not really focusing on that as much because I'm working on my book right now. I'm like laser focused on my book. Even the Daily Break was another company I started in last year during July. I'm kind of letting that slipping because I'm just so focused on my book right now. And that's basically just a media company who put out news. It's not, we're not major. There's no like broadcasting system that we're under. It's just an independent company. We're just putting out news in the most objective way possible. That's our main focus, just to kind of combat against just the increasing polarization of news today, which we feel as if is really, really important. And aside from that, that's kind of like my main thing, I guess you say I do. And the whole tweets and other stuff, the content I put out, that's just kind of like the I guess you would say the hobby. I guess I don't really want to identify as a I've been putting out content for a while. So I don't really like identifying as like a cultural critic. I feel that's kind of like really it's the best you can do. But I mean, I share my opinions here and there because you need to be cautious of that because you don't want to imply that you have a solution. Like if you were in charge of if you were in the positions that you're critiquing, you would do a better job. So you want to like that's why people tell me all the time, oh, why don't you try being like a senator or something? I'm like, dude, I don't you know if I could. I mean, I don't. What the heck do I know? What does anyone know? And that's my point. Like that is my point. The external search for someone to solve problems, that is the problem. So it's like the problem isn't these people who are in these positions suck. The problem is that you assume that I can do better just because I'm critiquing them. I think that's the root problem. So I think anyway, I'm rambling now. But that's kind of where I'm at. And I share my ideas. It sucks, but I don't have a great solution. My solution has been something I think so I can't even say it's my solution because it isn't. I didn't create this. I think the proper way of looking at culture today is to look internally. What we've been doing since we were on all four limbs. Look internally, educate yourself, open up a book and read it, enlighten yourself, and to build up yourself so I don't have to go to a ballot box and vote for some politician to solve my issue. Like take it upon yourself. I can't say that's my solution. That is the best solution.
I was gonna ask a question about your evolution because you said 2020 was a pivotal year for you.
Yeah.
How is your social life changed in that? A lot of people talk about sort of this awakening, and maybe we have a lot of terms out there called the Great Reset, which we know people are talking about. But we also talk about the Great Awakening. There seems to be a lot of that term being used today. In 2020, you had a friend group and things that you did every day, and now it seems to be vastly different. You said maybe you were reading books beforehand and writing a book and all these things, but what's your social world? How do you see it different? What's different today now?
I would say definitely my inner circle. I think is definitely different. There was a lot of people who we have a great like relationship. We have a great history, but there just comes a point where you just can't. Where you're going next, those people just don't. They're just kind of like they're not relevant. Like it would do them and you more harm trying to bring them in the next stage of your life. So it's just like a peaceful departure. It's just like there's just no purpose. And there's no like animosity towards them. Like I don't like hate the people who some of them, but I don't, hate all of them. Sorry, man. It's not like I don't have like I'm not angry towards any of them, but it's just like, the life now, it's like and those people I used to hang around with, smoking and like going out to clubs every single night. And I've been there, done that for years. And it just kind of, it's antithetical towards what I want to do now. What was that?
Are they mad at you? Did they disown you or anything like that? Or are you just
I mean, it was kind of just like a natural, it was like a natural breakaway. It's just like, this thing isn't working. Like, for instance, I had a somewhat assistant working from Norfolk, Virginia for like years. Like, he helped with the artists. He even helped run some ads for us, some of our artists. Like, he took money out of his own pocket and promoted artists, which I can't thank him enough for doing that. And it's just like, it just kind of just broke away. Nothing like, it wasn't like a, up yours type of thing. We just kind of just broke away. It's like, I'm going down this certain path, and they're going off theirs, and I wish them all the best. I mean, there is one, I think there's one person left, but he was kind of there before everything, so that doesn't really count. But they're just kind of doing their own thing. I posted a picture. I don't know if you've seen it. I mean, we were like deep. Like, it was just like a picture of, we were like in the club. We had like chains on and everything. I mean, I
think I saw that photo. Yeah. You're all dead, the straight face, the arms crossed. Yeah.
Yeah, the whole Dame Dash thing going on. Like, that thing, that whole it's just I enjoyed it. It was a good ride. But
it's interesting. I mean, when I was a kid, you can't tell, but I had really long hair. I had it down the middle of my back. I even painted my fingernails black at one point in middle school, and
wow.
Wore eyeliner because that was cool. And when I went to college, I was better than everybody else, and I had this opinion about my world, and it was all sort of crashed very quickly at the university, because I clearly didn't know anything, and humbled me very, very quickly, which was a great process. How old are you? You said 20?
24.
24. I was married at 21. So
wow.
we've been married for 30 years now. And it's a different world, the club scene and that stuff. I was never really in there. It was,
yeah.
But we were just troublemakers all the time. It was all about, sort of the rebel without a cause kind of thing. But you're so much more serious as a person than I was when I was your age, and the types of books that you read. Who's the stuff that's inspiring you right now, as far as the kind of books you like?
Wow, that's a good question. I don't want to say that I'm serious, because who I am on Twitter and social platforms is a completely different person. If you see me like in person, like, I'm not putting on a show. Don't get me wrong, but I'm a total goofball off camera. But who's inspiring me the most right now? As far as, I would say, reading wise, I think I'd have to say, who's inspiring me the most right now? It's hard to ask me, because my brain is scattered, so I have to think about this. I'll tell you this: one of the hardest books I read was Logic by Immanuel Kant. He was one of the Enlightenment thinkers. I think that book I'm reading, and also his critiques of reasoning, practical judgment, and I think Kant is probably one of my most influences, because he influenced Jung, he influenced Nietzsche, he influenced a lot of people. I think it has to be Kant, because he's like one of the biggest thinkers ever. I
Right.
mean, he was the one who in his idea of a priori knowledge, like there's some things, and he didn't really think that you could ever get to the objective world. He didn't. He rejected that claim. He didn't think that us as human beings had the ability to get like 100% raw,
Objectivity. Yeah.
100%, yeah,
There's no way.
from the objective world. And one of the crazy things is there's a book called Explaining Postmodernism by Stephen A. Hicks. I highly recommend that for anyone who wants to know about this. It's crazy because those Enlightenment thinkers like Hume and Kant, who were essential, even in Nietzsche, who were essential to that whole entire period and bring about this new way of thinking, they opened the door for the postmodernists to come in and say, okay, well, so they basically took Kant's ideas. They said, okay, well, there's an infinite amount of interpretations to the world, and no one can get the objective meaning. So that means there must not be any meaning. Then, like, they jumped
Right.
the gun and said, well, there is no meaning. And I think and why he's essential is because he gave, like, kind of like how I started this conversation. He gave the problem, but he didn't really give like a diagnosis about it. No, he didn't prescribe anything. He just diagnosed the problem. He just pretty much said, and it's essential to know that, because that once you understand that, any person claiming to be the emissary of truth is, that's BS, because the first thinkers and the smartest thinkers knew this. They knew, like, hey, there is no way to we're not one-to-one mapping. You can't just look at, like, well, for instance, there's a tree outside my window right now, but it's not actually a tree. That's a thing that is sprouting it's an object that is sprouting from the ground, that has leaves, that produces other plants that animals inhabit. I'm looking at that object, and I have to. So, for instance, that is the impression, kind of like in a human sense. That's the impression. I'm seeing this thing. I'm seeing a thing, an object, and I am applying a subjective term over top of what that thing is, and we call that a tree. So there's a separation. And once you understand that, and that doesn't mean that everything is subjective. That just means that we see the meanings of things first. You are totally in the lighting. We had a good talk. We had a good conversation about the eye and the brain. Have you ever read this book? You probably know him, James J. Gibson.
No.
An ecological approach.
I'm going to write that down. Go ahead.
His name is James J. Gibson. He wrote this book called, I'm reading it right now, An Ecological Approach to Visual Perception. I think you will really, really like that book.
Excellent.
And one of the things, I was watching this interview of Jordan and John Vervaeke. They're really, really two geniuses. And one of the things that they said was, and Gibson said as well, like, for instance, if we see a cliff, like, we don't look at the cliff and think, okay, oh my God, that's a cliff. We look at a falling off point.
Yeah, a place of death.
We see a place of death. And once you understand that, that just blows up any type of scientific materialism, that blows up any type of person that blows up trust the science. It blows up it just blows up all these ideologies in one bomb, because we see the meanings of things first. In that a priori knowledge, what is in between me sitting here and me looking at this object of a tree is my moral interpretation. And that is what Kant's point was in this particular pure reason. You can't use a pure rationalistic framework of the world and try to put that out there, because you jump over this middle structure, and this middle structure is what is mediating between is odd. That's what it is. So I think the question was, who was influencing me the most? I have to give that to, I say Hume and I say Kant, because their work complements each other. It has to be those two, and that is like the backbone of my thinking, because I understand that, not saying there is no objective world, but there is something between facts and values. And
Yeah.
what we're seeing now
Or meaning,
is,
facts and meaning, I would say.
yeah, what
like
we're
that.
seeing now, what is emerging now, is so weird, because the church had something similar to this during before the Reformation, like the Roman Catholic Church. They had, it was kind of the same exact thing. Like it was like the church essentially became God. Like they became God. There was no salvation. There was no grace. Like the indulgences, like you paid the church to, like they became God. They just like tossed God off the side of a mountain, Mount Sinai. They just tossed them off. They became it. And that's the same exact problem, but it's the switch. Like the purely subjective became, like, it was just hyper rationality. It was just rationality over top, disguised as a religious framework. And I say that to say, and people will say, "Oh, religion's a problem," or some people will say, well, science is the problem."
You can say that all day long, but the religion, humans will
Yeah.
find another religion.
Yeah, and and what I say is, maybe what the problem is too much of anything. What if that's the problem? No balance. What if that's the problem? So too much religion. Like, for instance, you're not going to go in the store and see someone smoking and say, you immoral pig, put that down right now or you'll go to hell. Like that's not, you're missing the point if you do that. And on the flip side, you're not gonna whip out some like periodic table of elements and be like, oh, well, you're smoking this substance, so that means you're gonna I can't just look at the periodic table and be like, oh crap, I'm just gonna put the cigarette butt out. Like, that's not how it works. There has to be some type of, there's a balance. You have to, when we're interacting with people, when we're living, it has to be yes, we have to be rational. And yes, there's a separation, but we have to be rational beings and say, look, let's just talk to each other like human beings. What you're doing is wrong because it's harming you, it's harming me, it's harming everyone. And the grace is, I can see there's a spark of divinity inside of you. And there is, even if you're consciously harming yourself on purpose, I'm going to have the grace to overlook that and have faith in you that you can change that. And I think that is what's missing from both the left and the right now. There is no grace. Like the whole libtard. This is why I don't identify as a right-wing conservative, because those people just have no grace. They do the same exact thing the left does. They say, oh, left. They say they don't know the difference between a liberal and a leftist. So that's the main problem. They see a liberal, they say, "Ooh, box," and they just put them over there and dehumanize them.
Yeah, it's all about dehumanizing. Yeah, that makes it worse. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there was a great TED Talk that I saw years ago about, and it was outlining through graphs a way to show how the media systems that we digest in our daily lives are actually separating our ability to, like you said, see each other's sides of the coin and to have grace to each other. And the reason is strictly because of the way that the Google search engines and these AI systems are designed to generate clicks. So when you have a click, when you have a system that wants you to click on the next box so that you continue to consume information from them, that gets them another opportunity to add another advertisement to your feed of whatever it is. And so what they want to do is the AI will look at how long you paused on a subject, how long, if you read that particular box, and they will give you a couple of boxes and start to figure out what kind of things you would click on again. And the idea is that they actually the algorithms are designed to make it more extreme over time. So, you know, and just to be crass about it, if you like to watch porn and you said, okay, I like this video, and then the next video was, you know, more and more extreme, by 5 clicks in, you're going to be watching, you know, horses and ladies together, you know. So it's the idea is that they're trying to make you click on the next piece. And they showed this graph of the red and blue dots, and it showed a graph of, you know, so over time they were overlapped, like they had similar values. But over the last 5 years or so, you can see there's a major gap between the red is over here, the blue's over here, and there's no sharing of values. And that was
what is this? What study is this? I want to see it.
I will send it to you. It is a YouTube video of a TED Talk where a woman, and this was years ago, showing that this is in fact happening, and it's just the nature of it. And it's strictly because the information we are getting into us has to be funded for free, because you're the product, has to be funded for free by the advertisers. So the advertisers have to get in front of you. And so if that model disappeared, like if I was a politician, I would restrict the way that, you know, these giant conglomerates funded themselves, because right now, you know, if they just charged to be on Twitter, you know, charged $1 a day or whatever, then they could eliminate a lot of the requirements that, and also, you know, just KYC, you know your customer. Instead of everyone being anonymous, you should require your identity to be inputted into the system, just like when you do a cryptocurrency. Like if you want to get a new wallet through the systems, you have to show your credit card or your driver's license and some sort of ID to prove who you are. Once you do that, then you don't have these extremists on both sides, and I don't say both, I mean on all kinds of things, you know, because there's, you know, there's so many different subjects to be extreme on. You would end up eliminating a lot of these, you know, dramatic changes and opinions through everything, because no one wants to be called out when you go, well, you sound like a little extreme, aren't you? And they're like, well, I was just being funny. You know, no one really knows how, you know, no one really thinks I'm serious. Well, I don't know. I think some people think you're serious, you know, when you say these kinds of things. You know, I one of the conversations I had with a friend of mine, and I have a regular conversation with a gentleman who we disagree, particularly on the COVID issues, because I look at the whole thing from a holistic standpoint, and he is a scientist, so he only looks at the science, the numbers, and reads the white papers in the COVID world and says, okay, this is happening here, and he maybe gets some data on other things, but he doesn't care how many kids have died from suicide, and the fact that the number of kids who have died under 18 is 6 times higher than the number of people that have died from COVID. Did you know that? There are 6 times more people under 18 that have committed suicide over the same time frame that people have died from COVID at the same age. And now all the news that you hear now of early education kids having a hard time articulating themselves, they can't speak properly, they have the wrong way to say R and T because they had their mouths covered, and so now they're really delayed in their education systems. And we've sacrificed our kids. We're no different than the Aztecs, who threw kids over the rocks and into the fire to appease the gods of rain and good, you know, good crops. And we've literally done the same thing in the modern world. We have thrown our own kids under the bus in the idea of saving grandparents and adults. And to me, it is unconscionable. It's no different than the Aztecs or any other culture that sacrificed children to better their, you know, quote unquote, you know, whatever it was that they were trying to appease. And so it's a sad state of affairs, and there's no dialogue. I can't have a conversation with this guy because he doesn't care about the sort of the other perspectives and the other sort of what we call unintended consequences of this. He wants to be able to have this one opinion. And I think You're right. I mean, you've got on a great point, which is no one's talking to each other, and no one spends any time trying to, understand each other. What's the right word? They all dehumanize. You said, yeah, I like that. That was good. They
Yeah.
dehumanize each other.
There's been a huge talk about CRT, critical race theory, that's going on, and I was actually reading. I was reading the actual text of Delgado the other day, and in the beginning, there was an exercise. I was reading the part. This is like during this, and let's give the devil its due here. Yes, critical race theory is a legal practice, is a esoteric legal practice in that department, but that does not
at the college level, by the way. At the college level.
Yeah, at the college level, by the way. Yes, it's like, what do you want a cookie? Yes. Okay, yes, that's where it exists. Now let me ask you this. Since when did any idea not leave a building and bleed into another subject? Can you name one? Do only cooks know how to cook food?
Right.
Do only videographers know how to operate cameras? Do only politicians care about politics? Do only priests read the Bible? What other area can you explain? And they'll say, well, it's not being taught. Okay, obviously there isn't like a huge thick textbook on the desk of a fourth grader learning about CRT. Obviously, that's not the point. Obviously, that's not the case here. The case is that this idea, and that's the wrong with ideology, because it spreads the freaking virus. It spreads out. Obviously, it's not being like, they're not going to win that side. They're not going to win that debate. Oh, well, it is being taught in schools. Or no, it isn't. It isn't. Like, you're on a propositional tier.
Right.
John Vervaeke, he has an idea of relevance, realization, and he has the four P's of knowing: propositional knowing, perspectival knowing, participatory knowing, and procedural knowing. In the first quadrant, I would say, of knowing, of like epistemological knowing, is propositional. So for instance, you are a human being. That's a proposition. And the thing is, when you're having a propositional tyranny, you're a human being, or no, you're not. Or you're a human being when you're having that type of argument about something like CRT. Well, it is being taught in school, or no, it isn't, or yes, it is, and no, it isn't. You're ignoring the participatory knowing. So this sector of knowing is taking a step back and saying, okay, what's going on here? I'm seeing that this kid and this other kid are starting to change their behaviors about something. They're starting to ask that kid, what is it like being Black? That white kid is starting to ask this other kid the questions about race, questions that are bubbling up from some things that sound like CRT. And just how you said you were talking to your scientist friend, he doesn't care about the nuances. He doesn't care about anything else. He wants to know what's on this piece of paper. There's like one-to-one things. He's like a marine sponge in the water, just opening up his pores and closing them, opening up his pores and closing. There is no structure in it. We're ignoring that type of knowing. We're also ignoring the perspective on knowing. So for instance, if I have a perspective on something, does that mean I know it? Or does that mean that I just have a perspective? Like, I don't have any kids. How many kids do you have? Two. Okay. Well, here's the thing. Proposition. Kyle Maxwell does not have kids. Okay. Is that? Yes, that's true. You can check that off with a check mark. But here's a perspective on knowing. I know what it's like to observe someone that has kids,
or be a kid,
or I have a perspective of knowing what being a kid is like because I have parents. Why is that being overlooked? So I have an idea of seeing an idea that is in this ivory tower and being spread out throughout the world, hence the 20th century. We have an idea of what that would look like if CRT was being taught outside of schools. You're ignoring all these other types of knowing because we're stuck on this proposition. It's being taught in schools. No, it isn't. Men can be women. No, men can't be women. We're stuck in this little, it's like a circus. We're stuck in this little, it's not even, it's like at the top, it's not at the top of the pyramid. No. Okay, we'll just use this analogy for now. we're stuck up here in this little stupid little dance, and we're ignoring everything else. Kind of like how you said your scientist friend was ignoring everything else. And that's crazy because the Egyptians knew this. And it's something also I learned from Jordan Peterson. The eye, the Horus's eye, that is a symbol of paying attention.
Right.
And that virtue was superordinate to knowledge. It was superordinate to morality. It was superordinate to rationality, science. It was superordinate to all the other virtues. So once you ask yourself, okay, how did these people who didn't take baths know that paying attention was the most important virtue? How the hell did they know that? Because if you're not paying attention, paying attention and consciousness, I'm not even trying to go down that road. Those kind of things are the same exact thing. I'm a conscious human being. I'm paying attention. If you're not paying attention to what is happening after you make your proposition, like your scientist friend, so basically you're like, okay, like I understand that, you know, this paper says this, but are you paying attention to these kids that are killing themselves? Are you paying attention to the aftermaths of what is happening from implementing these policies? Are you paying attention to that? And if you're not paying attention to that, it undermines the whole entire. There's no point in having any other of those structures.
I like it.
You should have asked your friend what was the oath that he took before he even put on that white coat? Do no harm. Did he forget about that? Be paying attention to that.
I like that.
These things go back literally thousands of years, and we forgot about all this stuff. So I think that it's important that, I don't know my point here. It's just important that we know these things and we pay attention, because if we're not paying attention, it undermines everything else. There's no point. What are we having a dialogue for if we're not paying attention?
And not only that, not only not paying attention, but they're demonizing, right? So they basically demonize. They don't have to think, and we're seeing that all over the university systems now, where people are shutting each other down and not developing the way to articulate themselves in a way that, you know, they could have a point, because everybody has a good point. I mean, there's certain things in the world that you can articulate from the left and the right, or however you want to put it, from two different perspectives, and they're both close. Like they're both getting close to the right answer. And the answer is, it's really hard to have one way to do those kinds of things. You have to be able to recognize, that the idea of CRT is interplayed into the human brain, but you can't, if you train somebody to only think that way by using CRT at a young age, then they eliminate their ability. They're stopping that kid's ability to think rationally and to question anything else that might be okay out there. You're basically indoctrinating kids using techniques that, and it's SEL as well. It's not just CRT; it's SEL. These techniques,
I've seen that.
Yeah, where you're basically training these kids to not take responsibility for yourself. For example, I mean, I think one of the things that there was a discussion being had right now, which is sort of some people realizing that, look, if you only attribute your status in the world, your status in life, your situation that you live in, with external control elements, and you are already a person who has anxiety for, climate change and COVID and, racial things, and you're already sensitive to those things, and then you through CRT say, look, all of those things are the only things that matter, and power is the only thing that matters, then the anxiety doesn't go away. You're not training them and teaching them how to think for themselves and how to build internal structures so that they can be strong enough to handle the world around them. They think, well, all these things will go away, and then I will then live in the world that I want to live in. but that's never
Yeah.
been the case in the history of mankind. You have to be able to be strong, and you have to be able to solve problems and to think for yourself. And I think Jordan Peterson, he taught me a really cool word that we learned wrong in our society, the word meek. Did we talk about this before? I can't remember. So we understand the word meek today as what?
Yeah.
Weak, as somebody who is, and
Couldn't
we
be
use
more
it in
wrong.
the, yeah, we use the word meek in the Bible. The meek shall inherit the earth, and we
Inherit the
associate
earth,
that
yep.
with someone who isn't aggressive, isn't strong,
Passive.
isn't all
It's
these
not
things.
pacifist at all.
It's not pacifist. The meek term, back all the way, I think he said it was in the Greek definition, is one who sheathed the sword. What that means is the person has the ability to pull out the sword and use it to fight, but he chooses to use word instead. Use the word, and that's use that over and over again in the Bible. If you can use the ability to speak instead of pulling out the sword, you are considered meek, and that is a strength. That's not a weakness. That is a strength. That's the ability to articulate yourself and get the result that you want in the world without pulling out your sword. And I think that is such a powerful way to think about, if you should be strong, you should be independently, you should be able to handle yourself in the world mentally and physically, but you should be able to articulate yourself more than anything. And the more people can use their words to talk and communicate, we're going to see much more of this instead of more isolation and separation.
Wow, that's insightful. I didn't even know that. Yeah, he talked a lot about like being dangerous. Like you shouldn't.
Correct.
You shouldn't be. What's the thing he always says? You shouldn't be nice. You should be. No, I'm totally messing this up. Come on, Kyle. He's like the biggest JPP fan in the world. Oh, here's one. It's analogous towards this. He said, if you think strong men are dangerous, just wait until you see what weak men are capable of doing. And that's one of his most profound quotes ever. Because it's like, that is so true. Because ask yourself this, we think of strong people as a threat, like the huge bully in the high school. It's like, ask yourself this: if you're going to take data from, let's say, the last century of high school or schools period of kids dying in schools, who's killed more people? The huge bully on the football team, or the quiet kid in the back of the seat in the back of the classroom that has no friends? Who's killed more people? The Columbine kids, or the huge quarterback on a football team? Who's killed more people? Who has more bodies?
Right.
It's the school shooters.
Right.
They have more bodies. And you ask yourself, well, why is that? Because their meekness, they pulled out the sword instead of using the words. They perverted that. And they sat in the back. He said, and if you know about the Columbine shooters, right? Yeah, you lived through that. You need to. I encourage anyone. I'm a weird guy. I like reading dark stuff. Probably not doing my mental health the best of work, but I think it's important. Eric Harris, he was one of the shooters. I forgot the other kid's name. It's Eric Harris and someone else. But there is documentation of his journals of what he used to write. I implore you, anyone watching this, to, if you have the stomach to, read those things. Read those letters he wrote. They're scribbled down in like the most frantic, like just disturbed manuscript that you could possibly ever even look at. It's just like, you can just feel the resentment and anger he had writing those things. Like, for instance, and it was so nihilistic. It was like, oh, nothing matters. Can you cuss on here on yourself?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah, he was like, oh, well, what was one of the things he said? He was like, why is it? He said, oh my God, I'm going to forget this. It's going to drive me crazy. So I pull it up. I have it saved on my phone. Oh yeah, he said that someone reads this letter, if someone doesn't, then whoop you fucking do. It doesn't matter. Like, and it's so disturbing if you understand that. It's like if someone reads this letter or someone doesn't, oh whoop you fucking do. It doesn't matter anyway. Oh, life is so terrible. It's so meaningless that I should just get rid of it. It does nothing matters. And you can just I'm doing terrible service to this letter because it's 1,000 times worse than I'm describing it right now. But just go Google it. Eric Harris, Columbine Tutors letters. Just go read that. And so my whole point there is just to kind of piggyback off what you were saying. I think we have to understand this idea of weakness and this idea of using words and expressing that, because if you look at this from a Jungian sense, that kid was like he was just total shadow, like everything. His whole shadow just came out and just boom, just killed hundreds of people. And I think it's important that we learn how to integrate that part of us, that shadow part of us. I was watching this interview of John Vervaeke and his student, Anderson Todd. That guy, he might be more insightful than Jordan Peterson. I listened to one talk. It was him and John Vervaeke speaking for 2 hours. They talked about psychology and shadow integration. That dude is like he's just like so smart. I understood about 25% of the words that they were talking about.
Right. Yeah, you get a dictionary out because pause.
Yeah.
I've been there.
And one of the things that he talked about that I didn't even know you talked about was a golden shadow. So when we talk about, and this is when they were critiquing Jordan, because I think they felt as if Jordan was making a straw man out of the shadow, or maybe he was misrepresenting it. So when we talk about the ego, the superego, the shadow, when we talk about these things, most people conceptualize the shadow as obviously it's all the things that you repress about yourself that you're not giving, that you're not articulating. But he also talks about a golden shadow. So it works in a reverse. So if you're a terrible person, you're repressing, you can also be repressing your virtues. You can be repressing your drive to be a nice human being. You could be repressing all these positive things about yourself. And when he said that, I'm like, first of all, I was like, damn, I didn't know that. The second, I'm like, that is so true, because what else would be driving someone to want to commit a genocide or a homicide towards people that he doesn't even know? Like, what else is driving that? You might say, if you're a normal person, you might say, because he's so angry about the world, he's angry about himself, he's dispossessed, he has no friends, he has no meaning, everything is just terrible. Why? The real question is, why isn't he shooting up the place? I can understand that. But if you look deeper than that, what do you think is causing that resentment? It's seeing everyone else not be in his position. I'm seeing other people have friends. Because we like to think about, like, I think we abstract people for too much. Think about it like this: we're all in tribes. Everyone's in groups. Everyone's in tribes. What causes the virtue of, what's the word I'm looking for? Gratitude. That virtue means nothing if you're the only person that you have to worry about, if you're just by yourself. Virtues holistically don't matter if you're the only person.
Yeah,
don't matter.
Virtue
What's
has
respect?
no meaning. Yeah.
If I'm a dude, if I'm stranding on an island by myself, what is respect? What's morality? What is it? I don't know. What is any of that? It doesn't matter. These virtues that we talk about and we discuss, they only matter in relationship to someone else, to somebody else. If it's 2 people or 2 million, 2 million people, they only matter in relationship to working as a, I hate this word, working as a collective. So when you think about what's driving these people, there's something I learned from Paul Tillich. I just finished his book, The Courage to Be. He fought in World War I. He left World War II before the Nazis started to take over. And he actually was giving radio talks from the US
Hmm.
denouncing the Nazis, like during like the Second World War. So that was extremely dangerous for him to do that. And he's a little Gnostic towards the end of that book. That really disappointed me, because I mean, and I understand why he lost faith, because he was out there on the front line. I mean, he said why he lost his faith in God, because he's like, I mean,
How can you not? I mean, it's hard.
I haven't
hard
came,
to be in
I haven't
war.
came, yeah, I haven't came close to that, to being in World
Right.
War One. I mean, what the hell do I know about that? What kind of, I mean, PTSD from veterans is like, it's like that's not even a question. It's like a given. It's like in the military, oh, here you go, like just hand it to you like that. That's not a question. So I can understand why he felt that way about what he did. But anyway, back to what I'm saying. One of the things that he opened up in my brain about this whole repression and having repressing good things about yourself and misplacing those things, like in the golden shadow, what we're talking about, is, so he defined courage as self is self-affirmation in spite of. That's what he defined as courage. So self-affirmation in spite of suffering, or self-affirmation in spite of my current situation. That's what he defined courage as. And he argued that one of the main problems and one of the main causes of people going down terrible roads was anxiety. I mean, that's like duh. But he looked at it's so weird, because I kind of thought this way too. It's kind of cool when you think something, then you read someone who's like a billion times smarter than you and they thought the same thing. It's like, oh crap, I know it wasn't crazy. That's kind of cool.
I know it wasn't crazy.
He thought of like depression, anxiety, like nihilism. He thought of these virtues. He thought of those things as virtues, but it's the pathological version of virtues. So, for instance, he thought of depression and even lethal suicide. He thought of that as a courageous act. It's the courage it's the courage of self-affirmation. So if we think about it like this, if I'm in a completely depressed state and I want to remove myself from life, if you think about this, I'm getting kind of dark here. If you think about it like this, why isn't that is a courageous act? Because if you're saying you're essentially saying this to yourself: life would be better if I was not here. So instead of, it's that meekness. So instead of taking my sword out and taking out all this anger on anyone else, I'm going to sheathe my sword and remove myself. I'm going to take myself out. I'm going to self-assess myself and take myself out. And and it sounds crazy, but that is a courageous act, to take yourself out. He looked at anxiety as the same exact way. It is, so anxiety is it's like you're taking more data in that your body, it's a physiological response to it. It's you're taking in more data than you can synthesize. He looked at this as a courageous act as well. It's the self-affirmation of it. It's the acceptance of acceptance. So you're accepting the fact that you're taking in too much data and you can't do anything about it. And when he started flipping these things that I thought were just terrible, that were only just terrible, it's like that, it makes so much sense, because it's like, if you're in this state of like depression, if you're in this state of anxiety, or if you're in this state of just total nihilism, it's like, what brings people out of that is courage. But you have courage already. You didn't lose it. It's like energy.
You just applied it wrong.
Yeah, you applied it. Yeah, it's the wrong application.
I would say that, I would push back a little bit on the courageous part, because you actually described the idea that when you're meek, and you sheathe that sword. If you pull out the sword to, slay your enemies and slay the people in your mind, of the things that you're battling, and then you use that same sword against yourself, you are limiting your ability to articulate yourself. And so sheathing
Yeah.
the sword to articulate yourself and to communicate others and to find out why you're suffering and to use your words is the hard part, right? That is being meek, right? The hard part is to use your language. It is to use the word. That is the hardest part. It is the
Yeah.
easiest thing to do, is to pull out the sword. And you can decide that you're the enemy and kill yourself.
Yeah.
But the truth is that I don't know that that's, I mean, to pull out the sword and talk about strength, I would say it takes the strength to be able to sheathe the sword, like we again talk about meekness, to be able to sheathe the sword and then use your words. And we talk about that being the way forward anyway, because that's the only thing that we can use to understand each other. We have
Yeah.
some ability to understand how we feel. You know, I can move my body language in a way that may suggest depression and may suggest happiness and may suggest strength or weakness. But our ability to communicate is the ability to use words to say what we're thinking. And it is a hard thing to do. I mean, you can't always come up with the right words to describe how you feel. I've watched you in this conversation. We've been on this call for an hour, and we've both lost words
Flying by.
where we're trying to say, okay, what was I mean, what's the right word? And that is the beauty of having these conversations. If it's easy for you to say all of those things, then you haven't really been thinking. And I think that is the beauty of this process that we don't see in our normal discourse of our world, is people trying to say these words, trying to say the things that they're thinking, because it takes the same amount of thought to articulate yourself as it is to do anything else in your world. Like if you and I think there was a couple of people, it might have been Jordan Peterson, that said, if you can't speak about it, then you haven't thought about it. You haven't really thought about it. You can say, oh yeah, the world is broken and these things, but if you can't articulate yourself,
what it is, what is broken, what is it?
Right. Yeah. Or even just to be able to open it up and hit only 1% of the problem. It may take us an hour to get where we are today and only cover a very small fraction of a solution. But if we don't talk and we don't use the words, then we can't use that elsewhere, or have anybody else listen to this and go, oh, that makes me think of something else. And so I know we've been over our hour. I wanted to wrap it up on the one thing about this meekness, because
thank you. I appreciate it. This was cool.
No, it was really good, really good.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring up something you always do.
That sword thing. That was really cool.
Good. You do the 75 hard, right? And you're trying to do it again, and I think you're on day 12 or 13th or whatever. And 15. Good job. Thank you. I mean, that, by the way, that's very, I know, I didn't know what it was. So when you explained to me that you have to work out twice a day and then drink water and then read 10 pages of book, I thought it was just one of those things. Like you have to do at least one of those. I was like, holy smokes, you got to do all of them every day. So good on you. And what I wanted to say was that there was somebody that was on Twitter or Instagram, and they said, how crazy is it that the people today that we see reading Kant, reading Jung, and trying to understand philosophy and psychology are the same people that are trying to work out, get buff, and lift weights? And to me, we were talking about the bully and, back in the 80s and the quote unquote, stereotypical bully. But really what we're seeing now is not this masculine event, or even this ability to people to build, warriors in the world. I tell my kids, I said, look, I am not training you to be a good student. I'm not training you to be a good kid. I'm training you to be a warrior in this world. You have to be strong. You have to learn how to take care of yourself in all kinds of ways, whether it's through the word or through your body. And so my daughter's in jujitsu, my son is, we go hunting, all of these things. So to me, it's about training your kid to be strong-willed and be able to handle problems. And whether it's physical or mental, you're going to have them. They're going to be there. You're just, this world is full of suffering. And if you
Yeah.
learn how to, and I said, look, if you can learn how to choose your own suffering, that is much better than any other suffering. I mean, because there's plenty of people on this planet that are suffering under tyrannical control, under poverty control, under situations that they have very little control over. But if you can choose your own suffering, this is your path forward. That's always going to be the way forward. And I think we're told today that, hey, you just do this, this, and this, and you won't have any suffering. And I think when these kids are taught this, they are in for a huge surprise in the real world. And then they end up having depression, and they keep on pointing to all of these other people and all these outside factors of why they're having suffering. And then they can't really figure out how to move forward because they've never been taught how to be a warrior in the world. And that does include our word, that it does include the ability to articulate yourself. And it does include learning how to teach yourself something, learning how to learn. And you know, Google has YouTube is a tool that it can be used for good. I mean, it's unbelievable the things you can learn and become a better person. And the books that are out there. So
just to add, well, I'm not going to talk ramble too much, but I like the fact that you said, why are the people who are seeking knowledge are the same people who are working in the gym and working toward themselves? And I couldn't help but think of the Greeks, because I don't know if people know this or not, but the word Plato, that his name actually means broad shoulders. Those people, those Greeks, those philosophers, they were in the gym more than they were learning. So even they understood the power of fitness. And why do you think their sculptures are? Well, and I always thought about that. I'm like, why are they so built? Like, why were they so like muscular? It's because they understood that that's more important. They're paying attention. That is more important, because if I'm not treating they were kind of mind body. If I'm not treating your temple with respect, everything else you're putting in there is just you're gonna undermine it. And also, you said you have a son and a daughter.
Mm-hmm.
That's great that she's that you have her learning jujitsu, because no one's gonna mess with her. Girls who have brothers are 50% chance less likely to get like sexually harassed or raped.
Right.
So her having a brother on top of her having like knowing self-defense. I did karate when I was a kid. I really want to get back into that. I want to do boxing or kickboxing.
I would encourage jiu-jitsu. I would go to a gym and try it out. And I'll tell you one of the things, I got a yellow or orange belt or whatever belt in Taekwondo. And I've done I did karate, not karate, I did judo when I was even younger, and got some, awards, or what do you call it, trophies and things. But my education of jiu-jitsu is, in my opinion, revelationary. If you go to any of these particular programs like karate or Taekwondo, what you're going to see in a format is, and they even show it in that stupid television show, Cobra Kai, is they all line up in organized. They line up in formation, just like an army, and they all go huh, huh, all these different forms that they're trying to do, and they're all trying to be uniform. And jiu-jitsu is so independent. It's so geared towards individual.
Eastern thing.
It's very much more Western. All the other forms of learning a martial art is very what we call Eastern, right? But the Western approach is to be the individual, right? It's to push the individual.
Well, in a sense, we're self enlightenment, that kind of like that whole kind of.
I see what you're saying.
Buddhist way of that's what I meant. But I understand what you're saying though.
But I think you would really enjoy jiu-jitsu more than the others formats, because it's really about individual control, individual progress. and the format is geared towards sort of circular learning. So everyone gathers around and someone talks and teaches, and then they grab people out of the system. So, I mean, she's in the Gracie Baja program. So every little dojo is going to be a little different, but she fell in love with the dojo that she is because there's a ton of females in it. I mean, it's like 30% females, if not 50% females. And one of them in her program is like a national contender. She's won a bunch of awards, and she's only 14 or whatever. But or maybe she's a little older. She might be 16 now. But it is unbelievable, in my opinion, the sort of the dialogue that you have with that program compared to the belt system that you see in karate and elsewhere. So I would encourage you to try it.
I want to do it.
Yeah, and it's very individual. It's like boxing. Boxing's little. I think boxing is probably the closest thing that you would have to it, but because boxing is so damaging to your head, there's really no reason for you to be punching each other. No reason for you to learn how to be control of your body, control of other people, be able to protect yourself with never throwing a punch. My favorite MMA fighter, and again, here's the loss of words we talk about. He was an educated guy. He was a college guy, Asian, BJ Penn. You ever heard of him? Watch him in the MMA. He never threw a punch. He would get into there like this. He would dodge a couple of times. And then he would dive, and he would submit. And his face was never bloody. He never had a cut in his face. He never got anything in his face. To me, he was a world champion multiple times, and he never threw a punch. And he was so much fun to watch. Yeah, he's one of those guys that could take his leg and wrap it around his hip, behind his head. He was super flexible. So people would try to do that. People would try to do something like this, and he'd go, "Yeah, you're not doing anything, dude." So,
wow, that's interesting. His name was what?
BJ Penn.
BJ Penn. All right.
Yeah, just watch him on YouTube and see some of his fights. But to me, he was a pretty kid. He was a pretty guy. He didn't want to get punched in the face. And then, that's just a technique I thought was interesting. But I really appreciate you coming in, Kyle. That was a lot of fun, man. and we owe you one as well. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime.
Thank you, man.
And so thanks for coming in, and that was good talk. And you want to do this again anytime, let me know.
Yeah, man.
Okay.
I'll be here.
All right, back to work. Back to the work, and you're going to do another workout tonight, right?
Yeah, I'm about to get a haircut right now, and yeah, workout.
You got two.
Yeah,
that's insane. I tried to do that this morning. I was like, no, we're not doing that.
Yeah. Perhaps a percentage of self-torture.
Yeah, and maybe the next talk that we can have, I want to talk about your book, because you're writing a book right now. Yeah, I'm sure you don't have a title yet, because that should be the last thing you do. But I'd be curious. I want to know more about that. So I think that would be a good conversation.
All right.
Okay. All right. Have a good day.
Thanks, man. Yeah, you too.
No, thank you. All right. Bye.